Actually, there is a beautiful group of people waiting to be added. Hello, hello. We've got another great panel discussion here with some of the people you might have seen already. So I'm going to start with those that you don't know. This is a panel discussion on change management, highly requested topic. And we were able to put together great professionals to actually tell you all about it. So I'm going to start right here. We've got Susan Whitehead. Hello, Susan. Welcome. Can we hear you? Maybe you are on mute. No, not mute. While trying your sound, hopefully you can hear me. I'll just say a few words about you, and you cannot talk, so you cannot say if I'm right or wrong. So Susan Whitehead, everyone. She's the VP Strategic Planning and Portfolio Management for Pact Pharma. We've got Cami Evans here. Hello, Cami. Welcome. Can we hear you?
Yes. Thank you.
Hello to you. Welcome. Cami Evans, the Executive Director of Operational Reporting Analytics for Insmed Incorporated. Thank you again. Thank you for coming. And we've got two of our guests and panelists who you might have seen already, and hopefully you have, as a great participant you are. We've got Brooke Dapolito here. Hello. Brooke is the Director and Regulatory Project Manager from Athersis. Hello, welcome.
Great, thank you.
And last but not least, we've got Dave Fender from Planisware here with us. And Dave is the VP of Life Science PPM Practice, as I said, from Planisware, which is actually one of our sponsors, as I said before previously. So thank you, Planisware, for making it happen and for coming here and being one of our wonderful sponsors. Hello, welcome, Dave.
Hi there. Thanks for having us back, Katie. Thanks for
Thank you.
opening the stage for us.
Thank you so much. I just actually wanted to check in with Susan if the sound works.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, amazing. So it's all happening. I'm very excited, as you can hear. So I'm going to leave it all up to you. I'm here if anything happens, and please, all participants, do leave comments, insights, questions, anything you wish on the sidebar in the comment chat section. And without further ado, change management and our wonderful speakers. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thanks, Katie, again for the introduction. I think for the audience, it might help to maybe know our backgrounds a little bit more with regards to change management. I mean, we all have been in a number of different roles, seen different organizations. So why don't we spend an extra second or a few seconds, and could we go around and say, where have you touched, where it's your experience, either educational, learned, or lived with change management. So Brooke, can we start off with you?
Sure, yep. So my background is large pharma, and now I am in a small biotech. So I had personal change, but throughout my experience, my change management has been in just implementing new processes, new systems, new ways of doing things with key stakeholders and with the teams that I've worked on. And I think I bring a unique and interesting perspective of what that looks like from a large organization versus a small organization. So I'm excited to touch on that today.
Yeah, definitely an interesting input from our pre-chats. Cami?
Yes, hi. So this is my third small to mid-sized company that I'm implementing portfolio management best practices. My experience is mainly in small to mid-sized pharmaceutical companies, less than 1,000 people. And as a change manager or a change agent, I have had to walk into these organizations and see where the gaps are and propose fit for purpose practices. So that's where my change management experience comes in.
Yes, very lived. And Susan?
Hi. I've worked in change. Well, I head up program project management. So, often, as you know, PM is involved in implementing the change. So that's been a lot of my experience. I've done this at a micro level, having been at large pharma as well as, but mostly small to mid-sized biotech companies. And then right now I'm, working on change initiatives more at a macro level in regards to just strategic reprioritization on what we're working on as an organization.
Cool. And on my side, so I'm with Planisware. A PPM tool is only as valuable as the change that it actually affects. And so change management is core to our success. So therefore it's core to me. So I've worked directly with or oversaw or provided insights for many different organizations, large and small, on how they can be successful with the people process change in this case, and then utilizing a tool. Okay, so in change management, you can kind of speak theoretically, but pragmatically, question number one, pragmatically, when it comes to PPM, project management, resource management, the things discussed throughout the day today and into tomorrow, where does change management fit? Why are we talking about it here? And what are some specific examples of where change management is key to be successful with the project portfolio resource management? Maybe we'll start off with you, Cami.
Okay. I think, in most companies, unless it is a big pharma that has been around for 50 years, most companies don't really have a standard set of practices. They might have some, but not all of them. So when you walk into an organization and when you're trying to make an impact, you're always going to see gaps, and you always have to come up with a plan to fill those gaps. And that's where the change management comes to place. Most of the time, people have been working a certain way for a while, so you have to change their psyche. We talked a lot about the psychological safety in a couple of previous sessions. That's number one. And also, how do you bring people along when the change management is not actually their day-to-day job? So this is in addition to what they're normally doing. Not only they have to change, they have to do additional work. So how do you bring that along?
And Susan, what are some kind of real world situations that, due to PPM, you've needed to deal with change?
Yeah. I mean, particularly being at a small biotech, who may not have like a large portfolio like a big company, the competitive landscape, right? You'll have to make a pivot there. Or, maybe the capital markets change and you're a private company and you're thinking about how you need to position yourself from your, an investment perspective and raising cash. So, that's a lot of the change that I'm experiencing right now are driven around those two factors. Go ahead.
Well, I would say definitely. I think there's folks in the audience who have experienced that for sure, who have lived through the growth. So yeah, do you have something else to share there?
Oh, the other one was actually around the growth, just on, you're a small startup, you're growing, you're transitioning to a mid-size, or you could be a large company and, making some reductions. So, as we do that, we'll need to think about how do we change as well.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen, specific to life science organizations, probably true of every organization, but when you implement a new process, we talked about resource management earlier today, and so maybe you're implementing algorithms or you're going from everyone doing it on their own to having visibility. You've got the different functions, the different factions have conflicting values. You want that transparency at the executive level, of course. And then we talked about, maybe the functions don't want to share as much detail. They like their sausage making to themselves. And so I think one of the big challenges with change management is hearing, recognizing, thinking through what's in it for each of them, and bringing that into your change management consideration and plan. So I want to go maybe to the next question. Brooke, I'll go to you for who's going to do this, right? And the answer is change agents. Successful change management requires change agents. So what do you consider when looking for change agents? What selection criteria, and how do you set them up for success?
Yeah, so when selecting change agents, obviously, people who are open-minded, right? So people who are already drinking the Kool-Aid of the change and who are open to such change, and also people who are influential. So who have a wide network. So you'll want change agents who have a lot of influence and impact and a lot of connections within your company when you're looking at change and looking to recruit change agents. And I also like to, I was going to say to the last question, what do they say? Change is the only thing that's constant. So I think that's important to think about when we think about change management, is that like we talk about it, obviously as a topic here, but change is just inevitable in all facets of life. And so I think, in some people, change is a difficult topic because, some people are averse to change. Some people are open to change, like there's a gradient of everyone's comfortability of change, but seeing as though it is an inevitable factor of life, really working with those change agents to help in your change management processes, but then also helping to guide and to help and to nurture and to foster those people who aren't as comfortable with change is important.
We got a question here. Do you feel change agents are more important to have at executive level, lower down, the doers, who will be affected by day to day?
I know, so this is going back to I would say Susan's comments before. I think it's both. It's change at a micro and at a macro level. Things are constantly evolving in corporate, whether it's just small day-to-day processes and softwares, or whether it's looking at the external environment, looking at your shareholders. There's change at all levels. So I don't necessarily think it's just limited to you have to be an executive to be a change agent. I started as a change agent years ago when I was a process scientist in the lab, just trying to change the type of ultrafiltration, diafiltration capsule that we were using for our process. So micro, very, very micro, but had an impact on the overall drug development process.
I want to add something to what Brooke just said. We use the term change agent, but none of us have the title change agent, right? So it's more like situational leadership. You are in a situation where you see something and you want to change it, and you become that change agent. And to Eric's question on what level it is, I think you, of course, always need a sponsor, and the sponsor needs to be at the executive level because they would have the authority and the influence more than anyone else, right? And then in addition to that, the change agent is more of a, I see that person as more of a worker bee, or somebody who's getting their hands dirty and rolling up their sleeves and, bringing everyone together. In addition to that, in my experience, there is a very important role that someone senior has to play, that is the voice of reason. Generally, this is not somebody who has an agenda, but this is a very respected senior level executive in the organization that whenever somebody says, no, this is not working, let's just throw it out the window, this voice of reason is capable of showing that person what is the value that this would bring to the organization. So I think those three people, the sponsor, the change agent, and the voice of reason, are key individuals in change management.
I agree with that. And how do we empower each of those three kind of levels? For an example, the doers, we need to make sure that there's let's say we as the folks that are trying to impact change, consider what's in it for me. So in the case of project managers moving from doing whatever they want in their own individual silos to an enterprise tool, just as an example, what's in it for me? They're going to be burdened with some rules. They won't be able to be as free flowing as they want, but what's in it for me? Let's find, okay, from the transparency, what do you get? Or from the automated reports, how much time can you save? And make sure that there's some intention on communicating that, versus at the leader. Maybe it's the senior executive leader to remind them, encourage them to say, hey, the data that I'm going to make my decisions on is going to be coming out of this new process or this new tool or whatever that the output of that change is, so that the folks that are having to deal with it know why they have to deal with it, what the rationale was, making sure that's communicated early, but also late, well into it, after decision cycles have gone through. If it's a portfolio tool, thanks to the organization's inputting of all the data, we were able to more efficiently have our annual operating plan executed, or iterate with more what if scenarios, or whatever it was, follow up afterwards with why the process helped support whatever they were doing.
Steve, Roseanne had an interesting comment in the chat, so I just wanted to raise this. She said, anyone who is working to change processes, systems, or behaviors in an organization is a change agent. They're at all levels of an organization. And I agree with that, as well as Cammie's point, right? So you can be a change agent at a micro scale, but to your point, Cammie, you do need that that support from your sponsors and your senior leadership to make such changes happen.
And we'll ask the next question. Maybe I'll hand it over to Susan. Came from Andrew. What's the approach to ensure that change management's not an afterthought in project management, or another work stream buried in a larger program?
Yeah, I was just looking at Andrew's question, and maybe Andrew have to add another comment if I don't answer this properly. But to me, I guess I'm kind of struggling with with the afterthought piece. I think so much. Oh, hi, Michael. I think so much of what we do and how we're implementing, for us to be successful in our projects, we're going to often need to deal with change, and so to me, they're very integrated.
I agree they're integrated. I'll pause here to let Michael introduce himself. Thanks for joining. He's got lots of experience here. So Michael, tell us who you are, where you're from, and why change management matters to you, in maybe a sentence or two, or what you've experienced over the years with regards to providing value to the audience today.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Apologize for being late. Had a meeting with the head of the company, so had to wait till that was done. But Michael O'Connor worked for Medtronic at operational headquarters in corporate science and technology in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And change management to me is as a project leader and a leader in the company, is always there, and always trying to find ways to adapt and to use change management in a way that will be successful. Can be at times difficult. I think, as you've already probably talked about with COVID and with the virtual settings and all those things, we've had a lot of change in just the last year and a half, and I think people have adapted pretty well. But yeah, change management is constantly happening, and it's always in front of us. And I'm always trying to learn new ways to adapt and work with it. So this should be, I'm interested to hear more what people are saying. I've got some ideas, but that's kind of a thumbnail of who I am.
Great. Well, we got Andrew's question here, and Susan brought the first point in, that we've always got to be doing change in every project. But see if you've got experience, Michael. I know you've lived through some transformations here or there, and I'm sure there was maybe change management intention. Maybe people assigned to that even task or role. And the question from Andrew is, well, if that happens, how do you make sure it actually happens? How do you make sure it's not just something that's talked about, but something that occurs?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's always a difficult thing for most people, right? And I think in change management, just like in project leadership or project management, you have to follow up on things. You have to have actions, due dates, roles, and responsibilities. I think it's a lot of those ingredients pulled together to know, A, is that change taking place? B, is it effective? How do you measure effectiveness with real-time data or laggards? There's a lot of ways to do it. So I think that's a deep question that depends on the situation, but definitely in my mind, it's got to be a closed loop. So it's got to be a full circle of the change. Is the change working? Are the actions in place? And what's the effectiveness?
Yeah, definitely feel that, and have seen successful changes where they were able to measure, and hey, sometimes it's not going right, and then you put a little bit more intention.
Yeah.
And other times where it sounds good on paper or on the whiteboard. Um, and part of that is different size organizations too. So maybe we can go there. I mean, Brooke, you've gone big and small. What is how you dealt with things differently in a large organization versus the smaller emerging biotech?
Yeah, just to further on what Susan was saying, I do believe, project management and change management are interrelated, but oftentimes what I've noticed in, both, large and small organizations is that you can have a project, and then from that project, a change arises. And so then it becomes kind of a subtask on your project plan. And it's interesting because at large organizations, you might have more resources and more time to create a limited duration team and a whole committee around the change. Whereas at smaller companies, it's more, oh, that's a great idea. We should work on making that change, and you get quicker endorsement, right? Because we talked about that endorsement piece earlier. Whereas at larger companies, it's a slower process to get your senior leaders on board with that change. Whereas in smaller companies, it's a quicker process up front to get the change endorsed, but it's oftentimes a much longer process because you're limited on time and resources. So it's interesting how that's an inverted relationship.
Cami, anything to add on to that with the three levels you identified, but recognizing at each org it might be easier or harder to find them?
As it relates to the size of the organization?
Yeah, or just being pragmatic of who's identified to fulfill the roles from organization to organization.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, I do agree with Roseanne's comment on here as well. It could be anyone in the organization. However, even if it is an executive that is a change agent, that executive also need a sponsor. So if it is a CEO that is the change agent, the board would be their sponsor, right? So, in terms of finding the three roles in the organization, I think it's much easier to find them in the smaller organizations because it's probably they're the ones who are actually going to be participating in the activities as well. Sometimes that becomes a conflict itself because the decision makers and the people who do analysis, it becomes the same person. So that becomes a little bit of a bottleneck sometimes. And in the larger organization, especially if it is global, then you bring another set of challenges to that. We heard before about some of the cultural changes and the communication patterns, etc. And either way, I think from my point of view, I think having those three roles are extremely important, and it's important to go and find them and pick the right people for that. So as a change agent, I think sometimes change agent is selected by an executive, or if you are changing something and if you have to go find that sponsor and the voice of reason, etc., then you have to go ahead and do that, which would be much easier in a smaller company.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to pivot now to Michael. You mentioned the current situation, pandemic and all. We haven't talked about that much yet. So how does change management fit into that, and why is it so important now?
Well, I think all of us had to pivot quickly, right? In our case, at my company, we had a tool called WebEx, and a month before the pandemic, we switched to Zoom. We also had MS Teams, but most people aren't a fan of MS Teams because I think Zoom's more popular. So just from an IT standpoint, we had to pivot quickly. So that was one piece of it. But I think just in general, people had to really sit back and change the way they were doing work so quickly, right? It was kind of like a fog in March of 2020 when all this came together, right? And I had to stop traveling. We all stayed home or unsure. And then, for my company, work went on. The leadership did a really good job of keeping things moving forward and keeping that change management in front of us and giving us video updates and doing what they could do. And I think it was because of that type of change management at the highest level coming down through the ranks. We did pretty well. We kept our portfolios in place. We kept our projects in place. We're able to keep people in manufacturing, the labs, and R&D in the office where needed. And so I think our leadership was ready for it. So I think in that case of change management, they were ready for the pandemic because they had a plan in place. If they didn't have a plan in place, I think change management would have looked a lot different. Now, with that being said, we've got a group that does just change management. So I'm actually a change agent and semi-trained in it. And then we also had a formal change management system called CAP, which was through GE. So we've done a lot of different change management programs. So a lot of people get access to this. But when you have to put it in place like the pandemic, that's where the rubber really meets the road. And I would say in the case of our company, they did quite well in how they handled it and how they are even currently handling it. I was just in a leadership meeting and we're still going through a lot of things and they're doing a really good job in handling what we're doing. And we actually went back to work about a month ago. And so that's been really good too. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Okay. Anyone else have any takeaways from the last 20 months that you say, well, in 4 years, we're going to, in the future, we're going to say, well, thank you, pandemic. Because of the experience there, we learned X about change management.
I think just the world as a whole, we had to become more flexible and agile and change our routines and our patterns and our ways of doing things, work and personal. So I think, we just, and also, it caused us, to use more technology and innovation, right? So like Michael was saying, Zoom and MS Teams, but also just, Uber Eats and DoorDash, so it challenged our normal ways of thinking and doing things. So I think I like to find silver linings in things. And so I'm seeing that as a silver lining of the whole pandemic.
Sorry, I was going to say, Brooke, I think that's a great point with like the DoorDash. And I think I have Amazon, UPS, and FedEx at my house every day. And I have some shopper dropping groceries off. It's changed just how we do things, right? I don't have to leave my home for pretty much anything. And that's good and bad. In Minnesota, it's good right now. So it's starting to snow, but it really has taken probably what things would have taken 3 to 5 years in a year and a half. It's changed our virtual environment. So I think that is the silver lining, that we're getting new skills and ways of working versus it taking a little bit for a long time. Mm-hmm. Now we can do things in a hybrid or face-to-face and or virtual. So,
and I've seen it accelerate the change that's needed to be transparent, because when you can just walk down the hall, even if you don't, you can, and ask your colleague. And now tools, whether it's PPM tools or whatever else, to say, okay, we've got to put the information in. You've got, you were supposed to do this before, but now people saw more value for themselves and for their colleagues in being able to pull whatever data themselves directly. So that's something that I'm hearing from my customers pretty regularly.
Yeah, and I think with that being said, in fact, in just the last meeting I was in, I've got dual monitors, 2 computers, 2 iPads, and I'm trying to do IMs and Teams, and it's good, but at the same time, it's kind of bad. I don't feel like I can walk away from anything because I'm getting pinged and dinged, and so it's I guess you got to balance it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fair. And Roseanne said that it certainly seems that the pandemic has dismantled a lot of the limiting beliefs about remote work.
Mm-hmm.
And considering the 4 of us are from home right now, I'm sure we can attest to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's changed the future of work, right? I know in our company, we've got remote, on-site, and then this hybrid. And the hybrid is kind of the undefined. Is it really a day in the office, 3 days? What do those other days look like? And I really don't think they're going to define it. I think us as workers are going to define it, which is really good. So that makes me very happy, because I'm actually at home too, and I just moved, so that's why it's a mess behind me. But I think that gives us a lot of opportunity and a lot of flexibility, like Brooke said.
So I'll go to the last topic we want to discuss. Why does change management fail? Have you experienced that? And did you get any lessons about what you would have done differently?
You want me to go first? Because
Sure. Yeah.
I do have a good story. Actually, I was implementing portfolio management best practices in one of the organizations. And actually, if Dr. Bainey is in the audience, he's quite familiar with this situation. Everything was wonderful. We had the buy-in. We got the buy-in from the CEO and the executive committee, and we did this globally. We did road shows and implemented everything. It was great. Communication was great. Everything was going really well. However, after about a year or so, the sponsors' agenda changed. And something that I would do differently is, since everything was going great, I think I reduced my touch points with the sponsor. So I was kind of caught by surprise that his agenda did change and everything sort of started spiraling down from there onwards. So if I have to do it again, I would continue my touch points with all the stakeholders as well as the people who are being changed, and much more often than I did at that point.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson. That aligns with what I said. If you got to keep it going, and it's sort of a bit of Andrew's question too. Yeah, if it's part of a program, well, the program will end, right? The capital funding will cease. People will go back to other tasks, but the change doesn't end. So I've got a couple of specific examples, but let me see, Brooke or Michael, do you want to talk about anything that lessons you've had about unsuccessful change?
Yeah, I was going to jump in just to Cammie's point as well. Just like a shift in priorities is, common in company are working on a change. So for example, I'm relatively new to my company and I was working on a process change for how we do regulatory submissions. And I was putting together process flow diagrams and putting together all these neat tools. And now my changes are going to be obsoleted because we are implementing a regulatory information management system. So I think sometimes change management fails because another change comes about that replaces that other change that you wanted to make. So I think that's an interesting thing about change management is the evolution of things happening so quickly, like we were talking about in the previous discussion about the pandemic. Things just feel like they're happening at light speed. So by the time you want to initiate one change, then, the team is on to the next change. So just kind of going along that point about what Cammie was saying in terms of priority shifting. And then also just limited time and resources. So it really, and that kind of goes along with the culture of the company, is how much the actual company wants to devote their time and resources to change. So it sounds like what Michael was saying is, Medtronic has a whole change management department. So clearly they, make an investment in change management. And so sometimes if you're at a company that doesn't really believe in change management and innovation, then you're not really set up for, success in your change management initiatives.
And I'd add on to that, as you were talking, the one thing I was thinking of, change management at my company is almost like a buzzword that's overused, kind of like innovation. I think it's overused at times. So sometimes it's just that it's spinning in the air and I'm like, what does that really mean? But I would say from a lessons learned from my perspective, a lot of times change management, when an initiative is implemented, it's not given enough time and it's not given enough follow through. And I think back to what I think Brooke just said, resources and costs. So something's thrown out there. It's a good idea. It's the flavor of the month. Leadership is behind it. And then it goes down the road. There's some bumps. They need more money, resources, and all of a sudden it stopped and something else. I mean, I'm in a large company of 100,000. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens. And that gets a little bit frustrating. But I'd have to say, as a whole, our company is pretty good at that. We do have a small group in change management, but really it's up to the individual areas and operating units to do those things. So those are resources they can input to. But yeah, it does feel like at times it's kind of it's such a buzzword. What does it really mean? And you got to kind of peel that onion depending on what it is.
Yeah, Corky said another reason for failure is management assumes that you can hand out, hey, who moved my cheese, and the work is done, and it's not done. I can give a couple of examples that I've seen from our customers implementing, PPM. So in one case, I remember project management, moving out of everyone using their own Excel, Smartsheets, PowerPoints through project management or Microsoft Projects or whatever into the centralized tool. And they implemented a data quality center. It's kind of like a little bit of robotic process automation for the PMs to see if they had made any mistakes in their plans. Maybe it's an activity in the past didn't have an actual date. Like they were doing proper PMI planning, this organization. And they had the data quality checks, but they found that the errors were high and over time increasing. And that is not what you wanted to see for an ROI of implementing a PM tool. And so they made the change management decision to introduce a stick and say that in your performance reviews as a PM, your data quality of your project plan from Planisware literally is part of that assessment. So that's one way that they were able to right the ship and then reported. I mean, they had the statistics. They literally could see that the data quality increased and any errors decreased. I can leave another organization or a few organizations that do this. Again, thinking about Planisware, implementing resource management, and say, at first you're getting the estimates, and I mean, whenever you introduce a change in resource management, the first thing that's going to happen, in my experience, after using the data the first time, is everyone's going to say, "Oh, the data's junk. I don't trust it."
Yeah.
Well, you need to get the data trusted, and there's a number of tools to do that. If you just go from there, if the change management team is disbanded, well, you're not going to get the return on of all the benefits of resource management we discussed earlier today. So a number of organizations have said, as a bit of a stick, HR will not approve a headcount requisition unless you can prove through your resource management tool there's a need. The demand is exceeding your capacity, your supply, and in so doing, all of a sudden your PMs and functional teams will start working together. I mean, they might disagree, but at least they're going to start communicating strongly and saying, okay, well, this is what I think it should be. This is why it should be that, and your data quality will increase. You'll be able to get the benefits, and HR is happy because they've got something they can really rely on, and it doesn't become a emotional game there. So those are a couple of things that I've seen that I wanted to share. We've got a few minutes left. Any other specifics that you guys have seen that are takeaway or nuggets that the folks out here can walk away with?
Monica has a comment in here. If you want to address that, Dave, it's a comment, not a question, but I think it's a good one to share.
Yes, selling the communication. There you go. Put on the thanks. Selling the communication about the why. Why is the business going for this? It helps it so much. And then there's a second point there, but I'll just kind of hammer that home. It's what's in it for me again for both the doer, but then also the receiver, the management that's getting the better data or the output, the more efficient process, and making sure that the why is reinforced with and it happened down the road. So, and then early adopters as well. That's a great point. There's early adopters, and there's a comment here that someone said, well, people who are bought into the change, sometimes it might be beneficial to find the folks that aren't bought into the change. And again, in our world, the folks that just love Smartsheets. Well, let's go to our Microsoft. Let's go talk to them. Let's go see what are the things that they say they like most. Let's go find some benefits for them elsewhere. If you can convert them, right, then the rest of the organization, they say, wait, even that person oh, well, okay, if they're into it. So I think early adopters and early detractors are beneficial as you make changes.
Well, that is definitely a good point. So what you're saying is basically prioritize who you want to change first or who you want to influence first, and then the harder ones first, and then go down the list to the easier group.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll share another specific example there to that point. And again, Planners Life Microsoft project, fair enough. They've been using it for decades in some cases. And then they go into a new tool. Again, could be Planisware, could be anything else, other PPM tools out there. And it's like, well, wait, what are you doing to me? And I remember with one organization we worked with, they made a core team, or is it executive meeting? There's like 15 people in the room. They said, okay, for the next half an hour, everyone find their favorite thing about project management and Planosaur, so we can make a list, and we can then help share that to the resistant planners. But let's be intentional about it. Let's spend this time. We could be making other decisions. We could be moving it forward, but let's pause and say, let's find these little things that are going to help our detractors. And yeah, lo and behold, we had a list of a dozen things. They're like, oh, you couldn't do that in your previous tool. You can do that in the new tool for you, let alone the benefits to the organization. So there's another nugget. We got a minute left here, Katie. So let me keep it open of any parting words here, again, of specific nuggets or what you think we could, the audience can walk away saying, here, we can do change better.
Yes, hello. I'm back, and I just wanted to say hi, Michael.
Hello.
I didn't get a chance to welcome you, but Dave and everyone else done a great job, so I'm glad that you could have joined us. You've covered everything beautifully, fully, wonderfully. And as I said, with every panel discussion that we've had so far, it's incredible to see so many professionals in one space. And I know virtual is not always the greatest, but honestly, working from home, connecting you all like this comfortably might be the best that we can do right now. But exactly, you've mentioned COVID and how we all needed to adapt to change, and change management is something that actually so many of you talked about, and it was great. I loved watching you. I loved watching your discussion, hearing your discussion, and I'm exactly as Dave said. I believe that everyone is taking the fullest and everything that you're all the speakers giving away from your experiences, and it's coming. You're all very passionate. So everyone can feel it. I can feel it. So I just really wanted to say thank you. And actually the comments are flowing. People are really loving the sessions. Great insights. Thanks everyone from Allison, just to say one of them. So it was incredible. It was incredible. So thank you again so much, Cami. Thank you for joining. Michael, thank you so much. You're super busy, I know. Brooke, it was lovely again. Thank you. Dave, thank you so much as well. And as I said, Planosaur is one of our sponsors. So another shout out to Planosaur. It's making it happen. So I'm very grateful for our wonderful sponsors. And yes, without further ado, actually, I cannot believe it. The time is flying by. We've got the last keynote of the day, and it's going to be with our wonderful friend, Corky. So I'm going to say goodbye to all of you, and I'm going to give a word, and I'm going to welcome Corky, who was a very active a commenter today as well. Thank you again so much.
All right.